Welcome to the Perspective Podcast. Today we have Aaron San Filippo, and he is the co-owner of Flippfly Studios. Thank Aaron. Say what up to the people.
Hello, everybody. Good to be here. I'm Aaron San Filippo. I started a company called Flippfly with my brother about 7 years ago, and we make little indie games. And I guess before that, I worked in AAA game industry and games like Call of Duty and Marvel, X-Men Origins, Wolverine, and stuff like that. So, been doing this for a while.
Perfect. What was your first indie title major indie title was Race of Sun, correct?
Race of Sun, yep. Technically, we released something before that. It was like this musical toy for kids called Monkey Drum for iPad. It didn't really go anywhere. It was a cool learning experience. It convinced us that we could make, games together, Forrest and I, but Race of Sun was our first real game project.
Gotcha. That was, like I said, I've played Race of Sun a few times. It's really fun. I do enjoy it.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks.
I saw one of my fellow troop partners, Linkman, stream it, and it was like really fun seeing someone who's actually good at the gameplay. And I crash into everything in the first 2 turns.
It has a bit of a learning curve for sure.
Yeah. But what would you think is the biggest obstacle in developing a game and keeping it kind of going for so long?
Like commercially, I think there's different challenges at different levels, and so if somebody's just getting started, sometimes the challenge is just making a game is really hard, and you kind of need to bring in all these different disciplines, and so a lot of people just get stuck on, okay, I'm pretty good at art, but I just have no idea how to code, and that can be this mental block or other block, I had the privilege of going to school for computer science, and then getting a job in the game industry, bit covered, and my brother was a graphic designer, and he hadn't done 3D art when we started Flippfly, but he learned, and we kind of complemented each other, and we managed to make something. And so that's the first big challenge. And then there's just so many different ways to fail when you actually try to sell something. And so that first product I mentioned, Monkey Drum, we had heard that putting a game up for free on the App Store and doing free-to-play was the way to go, because that's where all the money is and stuff like this. And so we made this dumb decision to make it free and then try to have in-app purchases for virtual coins and stuff. And it turns out that that's not the best fit for a game that's meant for 6-year-olds, So,
yeah.
We didn't make any money on it just because it was we just didn't have a good sense of what we were doing business-wise, And then I guess at the scale we were at, we made the game, we managed to run a Kickstarter, we learned a lot through that. We managed to make some industry connections. We got in at just the right time. We were really lucky to hit Steam just before the big deluge of games. It was right in the middle of the Steam greenlight phase, and so we managed to get an audience there. And then we decided to scale and kind of do console ports. And so we did PS4, PS3, Vita, Wii U, and then we did an Xbox One version, and then we did an iOS version. And the challenge for us is every time you add another platform like that, it just adds this maintenance cost and this mental overhead to hey, somebody just found a bug, and it turns out that bug is in the 3 versions we already shipped to. So how do we deal with that? And just trying to manage those products that are out there, and fixing that stuff can be important because it's that's what's funding us on an ongoing basis, And so if the game is crashing now because Sony updated the PS4 operating system or something like that, we've got to fix that, And so it's easy to get to a point as a company where you're spending a very small fraction of your time actually working on new games. And so I think that's the biggest challenge for us right now, is just finding focused creative time to actually develop new things and not just maintaining what's out there or chasing opportunities as they come, And the situation we're in is we're doing this full time. We have, an employee and a part-time contractor. And so it's just, we're perpetually looking at the bank account thinking okay, how are we going to make payroll in 3 months? What opportunities do we have now? And so I'm always emailing, Humble Bundle or other platforms hey, do you guys want to make a deal for your subscription service? Or, things like that just come up every once in a while where it's like, okay, we got this, or Apple featured us again in the App Store, and that's funding for next month now or whatever. So, but just trying to like wear those hats and balance those things that are all very important while also working on new stuff. I think that's one of the big challenges for us. So sorry, it's not a very concise answer, but
no, actually opened up way more like questions I want to ask too.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So with upkeep, I didn't even think about that. That a new firmware could totally break your game completely, right?
Yeah, and it usually doesn't, but like sometimes we shoot ourselves in the foot. So like for example, PlayStation came out with PS4 Pro, and it made it possible for us to do like native 4K support for Race of Sun on PS4, and they also launched the PlayStation VR update hardware, and so we added support for both of these things. But it turns out the version of the game engine Unity that we use didn't support like resolution switching, and so we created this issue where if you launch the game on a 4K TV and then you plug in your VR headset, then it breaks. And it was like the workaround was straightforward, but then Sony's emailing us saying, "Hey, we need you guys to fix that." And then we're looking at the version of the game engine we're using and upgrading that to the most recent version to fix that thing would break other things. And so, that stuff can happen all the time. And I mean, the other thing is like hardware changes. So like Apple released the iPhone 10, and I think it was the first one with like a wider aspect ratio and also like that notch. And it just so happens that we had like UI text that was like right in that spot where the notch is, and people are emailing us saying like, "Hey, when are you going to update it for iOS so we get like notch support?" And it's even worse on Android. It's just there's notches all over the place, and just some of them have physical back buttons and some of them are virtual, and it's really hard to predict that. So just launching something just creates that work for you, especially if it's like popular. So yeah, and that's it gets to a point where we're on 5 different platforms or whatever, and we just don't want to touch it because we're afraid we're going to break something,
Yeah.
And so sometimes people get angry. It's like, "Hey, I played game mode in your thing, and this switch on the ground doesn't work." And sometimes we just got to look at that like, "Yeah, sorry, we're not going to fix that. We can't go back and like make another PS3 patch at this point, So that's the sad reality is like we've got to look at what's going to fund us, and there might be 5 people who are actively playing the game on the Wii U this week or something like that, but it's like I'm not going to go fix a leaderboard bug there, So yeah, that can be tough.
Yeah, I'm thinking too, because like with all those different, because when you release a game, that creates almost double the work. Well, what did you say, double the work, or just?
Yeah, I mean, there's supporting it and doing actual customer support and patching, and then if you want to add new features, and patching, by the way, is like it's easy on Steam. It's like you make a new build, you run a script, it uploads it. It's pretty easy on iOS. You make a build, you upload it, you hit submit. 3 to 5 days later, they approve it. On PS4 and Xbox and the Wii, it's more like, or sorry, not the Wii, on the Switch. We haven't done Switch yet, but on the other two, I can say like it's a major ordeal. Like you've got to like request this patch and get it approved, and sometimes they want to charge you for it. Then on Sony, there's like 2 territories, and you got to actually submit like different builds with different like built-in IDs and stuff. And so, like, if we're going to do a patch on PS4, like guarantee it's like 2 weeks of my time, and then the risk of like breaking something because the code might have changed a little bit in the meantime, or their operating system. So, and then there's just like the, I guess, portfolio management thing where it's like, 3 to 5 times a year, every major platform does these seasonal sales, and they got to get approval from developers, and so we got to think about what sale price makes sense here, and what is the lowest we've ever gone before, and got to get that scheduled at this particular time, and so there's that, and then the actual tech support of just somebody got stuck on this thing and they don't know what's going on, or they're playing on Steam and this controller isn't working for them, or they're playing on iOS and they plugged a controller in and we didn't support that, and so they're mad at us or whatever. And that stuff can be surprisingly time consuming too. It's just sometimes people aren't very helpful in explaining what's broken for them. It's just, hey, the game crashed for me. Okay,
That tells me nothing.
what device are you playing on again? It's like on my iPod. Okay, which version of the iPod, and what exactly happened? And it's like that can easily take like a couple hours of my time just helping one person. So, and now we're moving into free to play on mobile with Races on, and so we're making an Android version that's going to be free to play, and I'm a little concerned about just that tech support. If we get 100,000 people playing it instead of 10,000, now it's like the potential support burden is going to be 10 times higher. Especially if they spend $10 in an in-app purchase and lose it or something, and I help an angry customer now or whatever. So yeah, I think having something released definitely like it's ongoing work, and if you want to like keep making money on it, you just got to maintain that stuff and keep up with that. And sometimes we put a thing out and it doesn't go anywhere, and it's just like, all right, we just can't put more time into that. The Wii U version of Races on was a good example. It's just like we sold probably less than 1,000 copies over the lifetime of that or something. It just wasn't worth the time in patching it. So
Gotcha. I can see that. That's actually, I'm really learning so much. Like the part that really got me that I'm still kind of hanging on is they charge you to do updates.
They have the option to, and I think they've never charged us before. I think it comes down to if you have a really big like multi-gigabyte download for your patch and a ton of users, and then they can like charge you for that server hosting and cost and transfer and all that stuff. So yeah, so that can be a thing. And I know like a few years ago there was this whole controversy with what was it, Xbox Live with Fez, where there was this thing where there was a game breaking save bug or something like that. Patched it at one point because Microsoft was going to charge him $30,000 or something like that, and it was like, I'm not going to eat that. Sorry, just don't do that thing that breaks the game, guys. You get all kinds of flack for it, but it's like I totally understand that.
You can't afford that. How can an indie studio afford for a patch?
Yeah, and it's the thing is like Sony and Microsoft didn't build their platforms initially around indies at all, and it was never about making things easy for teams of two people, and so just the labyrinth of websites and documentation that you got to fill out is like it can be a full-time job, and so sometimes I help people just get a game out on consoles or just coach them through it, and it's like, man, just be prepared to spend 2 months of your time just getting this thing out, just the technical stuff of like submitting it and going through the certification process and all that stuff. So yeah, it's a lot. It's definitely a learning process every time we decide to put a game on a platform. People have this perception that it's easy, and we use the Unity game engine and it supports all these things, and so you just switch the platform to whatever. No, it's like there's just a ton of work involved there.
Wow, that's crazy, man.
Yeah.
So would you say the Switch is more geared towards indies then? Because I've heard I see a lot of indie games released on Switch.
Yeah, we have a Switch dev kit. We haven't released anything there yet. Everything I've heard is that it is quite a bit easier. For one thing, there's one organization that you're submitting your game through instead of like one for Europe, Americas, and it sounds like they've streamlined a lot of stuff. So I know there's still like some bureaucracy there, but from what I've heard, it's a little easier. And it's part of why it's getting crowded. So like I don't know that it's easier to make money there.
Yeah,
with, the 1,000 other indies that are launching this year or whatever. So
just like on Steam with the green light.
Yeah. So where we're at right now with stuff is like it's really easy to make mobile games and get them out there. It's really easy to make Steam games, and like there's tons of competition on those platforms, but like it's nice for us to work on a thing where we can focus most of our energy on the game itself. It's like if we just decided to launch our next game on PC, it's like that would be a breath of fresh air for us, just because it's 80% game development and 20% platform stuff. But that said, like porting and doing consoles has been a really big part of our success, I think. And so it's always finding a balance, I guess.
For sure. I know that like a lot of titles I would never have touched if it wasn't for PS Plus or just being available on like a mobile platform. Like
Mm-hmm.
so you've heard of Wargroove, correct?
Or Wargroove, yeah, it sounds familiar.
Yeah, it's by Chucklefish. That's a game that when I heard it was coming on to the Switch, I was like, definitely getting it for the Switch because I'm gonna play it more. I'm gonna have a better experience on like the mobile side because it's one of those pick up and play games. You can pick up, play it, and then put it down. For me, like PC gaming is more like a sit down session versus like mobile games or Switch. Just pick it up, play it for like 5-10 minutes to like an hour, put it down, go do something else.
Yeah.
And so going into that, what's your favorite platform you've experienced, both as a dev and as personal level?
As a dev, I think I'd have to say Steam, just because we can put out a build with a patch on it, like in half an hour. So like when we launched on Steam initially with Race of Sun, we found a bug with the save game system, and it was like we had it fixed and pushed out there like within an hour. So like everybody who's buying it, hey, we're on the front page. Lots of people are buying the game. Let's fix this now so the new people don't get that. Like we can't do that anywhere else. Android, I guess, is pretty close. You can upload a build and deploy it pretty much anytime as long as you're live. And then patches on iOS have gotten better. So it's like 2 days. So for me, it's all about that iteration and then just being able to connect with people directly. So like, you launch a game on Steam, you automatically get forums, or we can direct people to our Discord. And it's like if you're on PC, you're likely to have a keyboard and you can communicate with us easily that way.
Mm-hmm.
If you're on PS4 and you download one of our games, it's like you've actually got to go and get out your phone or PC or something where you can actually like reach out to us. So it just takes a lot more effort for us to actually connect with people that way. As a player, man, I'm really loving my Switch right now. I like my PS4. I'm one of those people who I try to buy the new consoles when they come out, and then I end up getting like But so on the Switch has been Super Mario Odyssey and then Zelda. I just spent a ton of time on the latest Zelda. I'm at Calamity Ganon's castle right now, and just working on finishing it off or whatever.
Nice.
Nintendo's always kind of had a place in our hearts, just because like we kind of grew up out in the backwoods of Oregon, and my parents were not all about technology and stuff like that, and we didn't even have like a TV for a lot of the time when I was growing up. But when we did, we didn't own video game consoles, but you used to be able to go to the video store and rent them. And so we would rent like a Super Nintendo for a weekend, and it would be like a birthday treat that we'd get. And so we'd rent a Super Nintendo and we'd get Super Mario World and Mario Kart and Star Fox. It was like my all-time favorite, the big inspiration for Race of Sun. And then, when I got into PC gaming, I kind of found emulators and played through a bunch of old NES games, stuff like that. I think Nintendo consoles have always been, near and dear to me. But yeah,
I'm definitely a fan of Nintendo consoles too. Like Nintendo has just my best memories with games have been Nintendo consoles and the random RPGs that I'll pick up that I won't even notice.
Mm-hmm. The other thing that strikes me, and I think I've become more aware of it as a developer, though, is just that I have my consoles and my games that I enjoy, and I'll get them on the consoles that they're available on. But I've never made this isn't quite true, but I don't make being a fan of a console part of my personal identity. And I think a lot of people do, and I say that's not quite true because I remember when I was a kid, be a total Super NES fanboy, and I would tell people about the virtues of, Super NES versus Sega Genesis and how it could render more colors and all this stuff. But I get angry Xbox One fans who, we don't have 4K support on Xbox and we did on PS4 because they did it first. It was like we happened to be making a patch, and so we got it in there, and so we. A couple times a year, I'll get Xbox One fans sending me really angry Twitter messages or emails, saying why do you hate Xbox fans? Dude, just a game console, like this doesn't have to be part of your personal identity, like it's nothing against you.
Yeah, like I think that's a little excessive. People are just so strongly indebted to a company, which personally for
Hmm.
me, like I'm very, I don't want to say anti-corporate, but when it comes to platforms, it's just that it's a platform to do what I want to do it on.
Yeah,
So if it
yeah,
comes to PS4, Xbox One, or Switch, whichever one fulfills my needs the best is what I'm getting it for. What I'm
right,
playing it on.
right.
Yeah,
It's a delivery mechanism.
yeah. It's not part of me. Like I'm not a Switch fanboy. I just like it because I can play it in bed, and when I fall asleep, I
Yeah,
don't gotta get up and turn on my PC. I just gotta put
right,
it down
right.
to the left, and I'm out.
Yeah, yeah. You're not gonna put Switch in your user profile name or something like that. The world needs to know this is my thing. I respect it though. It's like everybody kind of has a thing they identify with. I'd like people to understand that, like, as developers, we look at these things as opportunities to reach people with our games, and we don't. There's no fan base that like we prefer or something. So
Gotcha.
yeah,
That's yeah. I figured developers wouldn't care too much like which platform as long as it's not like from a business side. From a business side, I guess like different
yeah,
companies have exclusivity deals.
yeah. Hmm.
Have you ever had to work with one of those?
With an exclusivity deal,
Yeah.
um, we we haven't. Let me think through this a bit. We've talked about them a lot, and I think this is something that people don't realize how these work. Is like platforms give developers money for those, and it's like that's for a company. Like I went on this Twitter rant a few weeks ago because like people are all upset about people going to the Epic store with exclusivity deals, and it's like for smaller companies that might be the difference between either going out of business or launching the game, or it's an opportunity for them to retain ownership of their project instead of having to get a publisher to fund it. And so the way I look at exclusivity deals is kind of like if that's a way for us to stay in creative control of something, and it just means that we have to launch on Xbox One 3 months earlier, or PS4 3 months earlier. It's like that's probably a good deal for us. So I know people hate it when they can't get a game that's coming out on their platform. It's like I think it's something to consider. And I if you're EA and you're launching your new AAA first person shooter, it's not about survival as much as just how do we maximize our profits.
Yeah.
So I understand the vitriol there, but like people got to understand, game developers who are also publishing their own things, like they got to do what they got to do to survive.
Mm, do what you
um,
gotta do.
and I mean, to be honest, like as a tiny company, we're most likely to launch on one platform first anyway, just because launching simultaneously on three consoles or whatever is a lot of work. And usually when we try to spread ourselves out like that, we do it all really poorly. So like launching on just PC might make a lot of sense for us, or just on Steam, or just on one other platform. Um, and there's just the burden of like if a platform has its own leaderboard system or its own cloud save system, like that's all work as well. And so launching a game on Steam and the Epic Store and GOG, like there's actually like additional development work that has to happen too. So a lot of times for us, it's a good idea just to like put something out in one place and see how it's doing, and then if it's funding more development, then we can kind of keep working on it and spreading it out and making it available to a wider audience. So, um,
Hmm.
but yeah, I guess that's my message to people: is don't get too mad over exclusivity deals. It means that developers get paid.
Yeah. Especially for indie companies or smaller companies because money. I already know how money is tight. Especially if you want to get
Yeah.
like good marketing and everything. Everything costs money. So,
Yep.
and speaking of marketing, working with content creators.
Hmm.
Have you had any fun stories with that?
Oh man. Um, so when we launched Race of Sun, we were just kind of like totally unknown. So I came from AAA, but no. Hey, this guy from Call of Duty studio went and started an indie company, like that's not going to make them buy our stuff, you know.
Yeah.
Whereas if it's like if you're Corey Balrog and you go start a company and they're like, oh, the developer of God of War thing, and everybody cares about it. And I was like, most of the time people don't care. So like when we launched Race of Sun in 2013, we were basically starting with zero audience, you know, and so we sent a lot of emails to the press and a lot of emails to YouTubers and streamers and stuff like that, and most of them didn't. And then we actually ended up launching the game from our website because we didn't have access to Steam because we couldn't get enough votes. Steam Greenlight system that they had. And so just in case people weren't aware, like for a while, Steam had this system called Greenlight where it was like you get voted on, your games get voted on, and the ones with the most votes get chosen by Valve to launch there. And so we were stuck on that system for like most of the year of the development of that game. And so we launched it on our website, and then we were just trying to like petition people to come vote on it. And so one of the cool things that happened was this streamer, Dan Nerd Cubed, kind of heard about the story of the game because we did a blog post or something like that. He played it, and then he just like sent people to our Greenlight page. And so like after a year of being stuck on Greenlight, all of a sudden one day it was like just thousands of people coming in and saying, I got sent here by Dan Nerd Cubed, and they call themselves procrastinators. And so it was just like a really cool thing where it felt like this community of people from just fans of this YouTuber were coming here because he like told them about the game, you know. And we got greenlit like that week, so that was awesome. You know, that was like kind of saved us. You know. Other than that, it's just really fun to watch people in our games and when people actually get it. You know, like when we've been working on something for so long, we'll do beta testing and we'll watch people and we can measure analytics and stats and kind of see, okay, 50% of people made it to level 3 or whatever. You know. But to actually just sit down and watch somebody experiencing it for the first time is really a thing that we enjoy doing, like after a game comes out, you know. And so it can be really emotional to just like, you know, I don't know if you saw the movie Indie Game, the movie with the guy who made Super Meat Boy. There's this little shot of him just like watching, and he's kind of like sitting there with his wife, and they're kind of just crying tears of joy because it's like, hey, they get it, you know. That's actually really cool, you know. So that's yeah, my experience with creators is just like it's awesome when they actually play our games and understand them and enjoy them like the way that we intended, you know. These days it feels like maybe this is just the fact that we haven't, you know, Race of Sun is kind of old hat at this point. We launched a game called Evergarden this last summer, and it was just, I think it was a combination of the fact that it was a puzzle game, but it also wasn't something that we made this deliberate choice to like not explain the gameplay very well at first, and we wanted it to be a thing that you kind of like discover the rules as you play, which is kind of just this aesthetic design choice we made. But the end result was like no streamer wanted to play it. You know, we just sent out hundreds and hundreds of emails to content creators, you know. So I think that's a weird spot that we're at in the industry where content creators have their games that they know will bring them views, and I think they can be sometimes reluctant to like try new things if it feels like, hey, I might get 300,000 views on another, you know, Fortnite stream, or I can play this new indie game nobody's heard of and maybe 20,000, you know. And so like it definitely is this feedback loop where it affects people like us when we're designing games, thinking like, oh, this is totally a YouTubeable moment, you know. Like one of these new games we're working on is more of a physics playground, you know, with lots of like kind of open world, you know, emergent gameplay. And so that's something that's on our mind a lot. Like I think we're going to get more content creators to pay attention to this one, just because it's like there's more opportunity for them to be expressive and create comedy and stuff like that, you know. So yeah, that's a weird. I think the strangest thing about content creators is that it feeds back into game design, because you can make a game that you think a certain target audience is going to enjoy playing, or you can make a game that you think content creators are going to be able to turn into something that's entertaining, that repeat play. And, you know, get millions more views for your game than you would have otherwise. You know? It's all about visibility for us, you know.
Hmm.
Um,
I'd even like take that into account how like developers could think about that during development. Like you
mhm.
think that would come across my mind at some point, but that it never really did. Hmm.
Yeah, yeah, and it's I don't know if you heard of QWOP.
Oh,
You know
I've heard
this,
of co-op.
and there's that whole class of games where it's just like um, kind of clunky, difficult to control physics that creates lots of funny moments, you know. And I think that's kind of like it's almost its own genre, you know. But there's definitely like value in pursuing those things that people will kind of just create this whole like culture around, you know. Like it's not enough to just make a game that's fun anymore, you know.
Yeah, you got to make something that'll stand out and also grab attention and be able to, and for some games, be able to generate revenue after the fact. Correct?
I think so. One kind of cynical way to look at it is like how many views does your game page get and what percentage of those people are going to buy it, you know. And this is something that you can kind of calculate, you know, like on the iOS app store, if we get a million views with a particular game, we might get 10,000 sales, you know, which sounds, you know, it's a pretty low conversion rate. So it's like if there's a YouTuber who plays a game, any game, you know, whether Flappy Bird, you know, it wasn't anything special. It was just PewDiePie played it because he thought it was funny and frustrating, and he's got 20 million viewers or whatever, and he makes an entertaining about it. People are gonna go download it, you know, even if it. So that stuff can make or break you, you know. And sometimes it's like sometimes people won't buy it right away. Sometimes it's just like it's one more point in time where they become aware of your game. Um, I heard somewhere a while back that like on average we have to hear about something like 5 or 6 times before we'll actually buy it. And so, you know, if you come across it on Steam and you've never heard of it before, you're probably if 5 different friends tell you, "Hey, have you played this yet? It's really good," then you might consider it more. You know, so if if people browse YouTube and there's 3 different people who they follow and they all play it, like they're probably going to be more likely to buy it too. So it's all about numbers, I guess.
Yeah, with the conversion rates, like I expect whenever somebody like sees something on the page, like I know for me, if it's just on the page, I'm not probably not going to buy it just because you know you see a game. There's
Mm-hmm.
so many games out there. It's like, I'll look for something else. But then if I see like my friends playing it, or like I think Apex Legends is actually a great example. I don't
Mm-hmm.
like BRs, but I do play Apex. And it was
Right.
about 5 or 6 times where I've seen Apex and heard of Apex. So I'm like, fine,
Mm-hmm.
I'll try it. And now I play at
Mm-hmm.
least like 3 hours a day. So
Yeah. And that's the weird thing is like there's so many games that are in that category where it's like there's the hump of getting over the point where you're actually willing to just try it, and then you play it for like a few minutes and maybe you bounce off of it, but once you kind of get into it, it can totally get us hooks in you, you know.
oh yeah,
um and it's I mean, and I'm sure you're aware of this as a podcaster too. It's like, okay, you might tweet out something about it and somebody's going to see that and maybe they'll come and visit the page, but are they going to spend, you know, an hour and a half watching it? Well, some of your bigger fans will, but there's this funnel conversion where it's like, okay, this is 100%, and then it jumps down, and it can kind of consume you as a person who's doing creating things for a living, just to like try to optimize every step of this. Like when you see this on YouTube, like people have gotten really good at making cool like cover images, just because like it's all about getting you to hit play on the thing when you see it somewhere,
yeah.
you know. I got
That's
my big grid of, you know, my subscriptions, and this one looks funny, you know, so I hit that, you know. um, yeah.
it's really important to get that initial click because if you're confident in what you're bringing to the table, the only thing that
Mm-hmm.
will really hold you back is that initial click, getting people to check it out.
Yeah. Yep. And then once you do that, getting them a little bit hooked, you know. And um, there's a really smart indie I know named Adam Saltzman, and he was made popular by this game called Cannonball, which was like one of the first endless runners a few years ago. And it's like this 2D endless runner where you're like a guy in a suit and you're like running in this post-apocalyptic world, and just like jumping over buildings and stuff. And what he told me was like he launched that game on the Flash portals when that was still a thing, and in that world, it's like everything's free. You can just try 10 games a minute if you want to. And so his whole thing was, he called it generous game design, where it's like put something really flashy and really polished, like in that first 60 seconds, to communicate to the person who's checking it out, like, hey, this is worth your time, you know. And so like he has this really beautiful intro animation with like birds flying away and all this stuff. And it was like that was all about just like telling people who went to the trouble of actually clicking on it, like, hey, you should spend some more time with this because there's going to be more cool stuff, you know. So I think about that a lot, just like that first 5 minutes of our games, you know, like, you know, people can get a lot of games for free these days, and so I think it's more important than ever.
Oh yeah.
And it's a weird thing, like game design has to evolve with the times in that way. Where 30 years ago, if you were making a NES, what was 30 years ago? Super NES, NES, I lose track of time. It's like people might get 3 games in a year, you know, and if you get this game for Christmas, or you saved up your money and you spend $50-$60 on it, you're gonna spend time with it, and you're gonna put up with any number of kludgy things, and you'll read the manual and you'll talk to your friends about it, and you might get stuck in the first 5 minutes. And then, you know, The Legend of Zelda, like I'm convinced if you release that game today, like the original NES Legend of Zelda, like nobody would finish it, you know, because it just takes too much effort, you know. So, but you just have to design for the audience that you have, and platforms matter too. Like if you spend $20 on a Steam game, you're probably going to be more likely to give it some time than you would with a free mobile game, you know. And so if you look at mobile games, it's very much in that flash game category, where it's like, you know, it's hard enough to get people to download it, but they might have downloaded 5 other games today too. You know, and every time you launch a new one, it pops up ads for other games. Just trying to get your hooks in people a little bit, you know, and get them to come back and play it again can be a real challenge.
Let's see. When it comes to hooks for games, I think, like I say, going back to like back in time, back in the NES days, even for me, the one thing I always loved about games, when I got a new game, especially if I was excited about it, the first thing I would do is sit there and watch that intro sequence. It's always like the best feeling. New game, you don't know, you watch the intro sequence, open the manual up on the way home. You get prepared for that. And I kind of miss that feeling. You don't get that feeling anymore. At least with the, you know, the hype of having it. Since I don't know, yeah, it doesn't feel the same as like again from GameStop coming home and like popping it in.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's really different. Now I was like, okay, all right, game, you got 5 minutes to get my attention. I'm gonna get something else. You know? Yeah.
And with free to play, I want to ask you this too. What do you think of different monetization methods for free to play games? Like, which ones would you employ, and which ones do you find are absolutely just not good?
Right, totally. I think my thinking has evolved a little bit on this over time. So, like, you know, 5 years ago when we got started, video ads weren't as big of a thing as they are now, and so it was more about in-app purchase monetization. And the way it works is like, I mean, to be honest, like a lot of people making free-to-play games, to be cynical, like aren't so much interested in the game side of things. This thing, and they identify what they call the whales, and it's like you are a whale if you spend more than $30 or something like that, you know. And so that's where you get these games that have $99 coin chests, you know, because they know that they're only going to convert like 2 to 3% tops of their players to spend any money. And so they look at that 3% and ask the question of like, how can we extract as much as we possibly can of them? and then the other 97% are just kind of like, you know, we're either going to convert you to this, or we're going to like annoy you enough that you go away, or we're going to like use you to create demand for those other purchases somehow, you know. I kind of detest that way of thinking about it, because I don't know a lot of people who spent hundreds of dollars on a free-to-play game who feel good about that afterwards. It's like there's this life cycle where you get addicted to it, and then you spend all this money to try to like succeed at something in the game, and eventually you quit because you realize that's ruining your life or something. On the other end of that, so like this game Crossy Road came out a few years back, and it was all about a fun experience, and it monetized by um, showing you ads. And it was like I think his average revenue, but he got enough featuring and built the game so that people could get into it really easily. And so he just got like 200 million people playing it. And I think that scale where you can just make a little bit of money on every player is like fundamentally I like that more. And I think I'm okay with something in between too. And there's a question of like, I guess what I call pay to win, where it's like you insert these things in the game where you just get a big advantage for spending real money on it. And I think I'm mostly opposed to that. I mean, there's this kind of like game design thing that makes me feel a little $20 and you get an edge. It's not new. It's like if you're playing Cruising USA back in the arcades or whatever, and it gives you the option to like put 75 cents in and get a continue. It's like that's the same thing. Like you're getting a better score because you spent money on it. You know.
Yeah.
I'd rather just like charge people to keep playing. That seems more fair to me. Like, you know, it's like you play for a while. Like you want to keep playing. Hey, you spend $1 and you get whatever more lives. You know, I think ads are kind of a way to level the playing field a little bit because like if you don't have any money, you can still spend 30 seconds of your time watching an ad, and that might be like a way to support the developer indirectly. Of course, like watching ads all day is not a fun activity or necessarily like a good way to spend your time either. So it's like there's no great thing there, you know. So you know we're thinking about this a lot with our game Race of Sun. You know we're doing a free to play Android thing. We've added like virtual items you can buy, and we're just thinking about like, okay, there's 5 ships you can buy. Are these purely aesthetic, or do we want to have like a little bit of an edge that you get with each one of these, and how much? Where is that line for us? You know, and so we're thinking about that a lot. It's like you know we want people to value these things, and the most direct way to make them valuable is like give them some kind of a gameplay effect or benefit, you know. But we don't want to cross that line where it's like, okay, people are going to spend lots of money to get some kind of gameplay edge, you know. And does that drag down the experience for everybody who's playing? If you know, like people who spend more money are like going to get an advantage, you know. I've kind of come around to games that give you like one more continue if you watch an ad or something like that, because it feels like, okay, people who watch one ad are going to get one more life, but everybody can. It seems fair to me, you know.
Yeah.
Even though like watching ads is kind of like this negative experience, you know. And the other secret with ads is like we don't actually make much money on ads, from what I can tell. It's more about put them in front of people frequently enough so that they just want to spend more time playing the game than watching ads, and they'll spend the $4.99 or whatever to like remove the ads. Like that's where you actually make your money, not on the ad. You know?
Using ads as like a punishment.
I mean, to be honest, yeah, it's like, you know, I guess you can frame it in a way where it's like an incentive. Hey, do you want to get double the coins? You can watch an ad, you know, and it kind of feels like you're paying for that by watching an ad, and that's fair, whatever, you know. But for the most part, like, I think the money that you make is when people spend money on the in-app purchase tree. And the way ads work is kind of weird, where it's like you don't actually make any money when people watch the ads. For the most part, you make money when they actually click on one, which I didn't know at first, and it's kind of weird, but it's all about just like show lots of ads and hope that every 1,000 views, like somebody actually clicks on one. And I'm kind of convinced that like when people click on a mobile ad, it's because they accidentally did it. You know, it's like it
always
pops up the little X and it's like, and it's like, okay, that's actually 50 cents to the developer when you, you do that. You know? It's kind of this weird statistical game, you know. I know some people who are less scrupulous, like they put the little banner ads in and they put them like right underneath the retry button, you know, and so just like hope people will accidentally click it, and it's like that's just gross, you know, like you're just annoying people, you know. So it's a weird. I mean, mobile is weird because it's just like when you download a mobile game for free, you're not invested in it whatsoever. You know, you don't care about the developer, you don't care about you. You probably downloaded it because a friend told you about it, or you saw an ad book or something like that, you know. And so it's this weird sort of difference in business model between that and just like the $20 Steam game, where it's like you bought this because you did some research on it, or you played a previous game from the developer, or you read a review or you watched a YouTube thing, and you're probably just going to be more invested by default. And so it's a weird sort of business model where like 95% of the people are going to bounce off it in the first couple minutes and never come back. And it's those 5% of the rest of them that you really care, that are actually going to like give you some revenue. Or if you're a giant publisher and you can get 100 million people to download it, maybe you still make money on those people that bounce off it in 5 minutes, but you do it by showing them 3 or 4 ads in those first couple minutes, and then they click on one and they get annoyed and they just uninstall it or whatever at that point. But you still got your 50 cents because they clicked on it, and that scales, and it's just like, it's kind of gross to me, that's kind of like you build your business around that model, like we want to make games that people actually enjoy and give us money because of it, so.
I call it the college beer fund app.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I count the number of hands, how many times I spent money on a mobile app. Actually, I think I've never spent money on a mobile app, mainly because I used to play FIFA back in the day. I'm sure you understand how FIFA is.
Yeah, because like if you play FIFA, like it's like a part of your life, right? Like you're gonna schedule time with your friends to play,
and with Ultimate Team, their pay to win mode, you have to buy packs to get better players. And the funny part was, the economy was so bad in 2014, 2015, EA had to physically had to actually adjust the economy because they noticed it was literally impossible to get a top player. One of the top players costs at least 2 million coins, and he wasn't even an amazing player. He was top 10%, not 1%, top 10%. Still good, but it's an average player. And you got about 350 coins per game, and 1,000 coins weekly bonus. Doing the math for that one player, that will take you at least a year just for saving for that one player. And FIFA comes out every year, so it's gonna be moot by the time the year comes. So if you want that player, you have to spend money.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't have a problem with having features in a game that people have to spend money for. I think my issue is more about when you get some real advantage in gameplay by spending that money, because it's if you can save 5 hours of work by spending a couple bucks, I don't have as much of an issue with it. Yeah, if you can't get this top player unless you're putting down that $30 or whatever it costs, yeah, it's but they do the math on it. I mean, they've got people whose job is just to analyze that, and the question is are they thinking short term or long term? I mean, if I'm EA and I'm putting out this FIFA franchise, I don't want people to resent me for it year after year, because eventually they're going to stop playing, or somebody's going to come along with a game that's not as abusive,
or they're going to sell coins on the black market, so people other than you are getting that money and still getting what they want. Which was actually, it's sad when that was a better option. The only reason I didn't do it was because fear of getting banned. But looking back on it financially, I would have had at least a 500% increase in profits, or at least just value, the very least, because it was horrible. I had spent at least over $150 in college on FIFA, not counting buying the game itself each year. So, as a college student, that's important money I could use elsewhere. So, and then
so this was to get better players so that you could be more competitive in the multiplayer. Is that kind of what it came down to?
Yep. Yeah. And it's all random based too. So you buy packs where you could get a chance of getting a player.
So this is the Magic the Gathering model, where it's you want these cards and more money, and you can't guarantee it, which is brilliant. It's kind of it's the older version of loot boxes, right? You spend whatever it costs on that pack.
Yeah, it's exactly that. The only issue I like with Magic though is at least you can buy the card straight out, fairly, within the game's rules. With FIFA, the only non-TOS breaking way to do it was by buying packs and gambling for those players, and hopefully getting cards you can sell off to make more, and then use that to buy what you want to buy. But it was just so predatory, because I know people with gambling addictions, and that was, I know I got such a rush from opening a pack and hoping I got something. There are channels dedicated on YouTube to pack openings for millions of views. Actually, do you know KSI? Famous YouTuber?
Sounds familiar.
okay, yeah, he started out doing FIFA, like playing FIFA and
Yeah,
doing pack openings
yeah.
and everything, and that was an industry. It was
Hmm.
money for that.
Man, man. Yeah, and I guess that's I'm most comfortable with games that put some kind of a cap on how people can spend, or like how much you can spend. I don't even have a problem with like monthly subscriptions. I think that's great. Like the whole idea of like they call it software as a service or games as a service is like if you have enough dedicated people who want to give you money every month where you can keep working on it and putting more resources into it and kind of create that virtuous cycle of like, hey, we're going to make this a thing we maintain for years, like that's great to me. But the idea that you have people who are spending like hundreds or even like thousands of dollars on a game, it's like I don't. There's something going on there that's not healthy.
Yeah, no. Like I believe the most anyone should put into a game financially is dependent. Depends on the game, but
Yeah.
I think the base price plus like maybe half of that in like microtransactions.
Yeah.
Probably I think the safest like amount there.
Right. Right. And I guess there's the other point of view that like, oh, there's super wealthy lawyers or whatever who just love your game and want to put it down, and that's always the defense. But I think more often than not, it's people like you who are like, I'm just a college student and I had a couple $100 extra. I could have spent it somewhere else. I probably should have, but I really, really want a competitive edge. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and it's worse with multiplayer, and I mean, worse or better depending on your perspective. Is like it just makes everything more valuable because people have that competitive spirit and you want to get that edge, and you're probably playing more frequently, and everybody else can see that you have that player, that car, that whatever it is. Um, so yeah, it's fun stuff to think about.
For sure. Now, this is a question too I've always had, but I never really had no way to like really ask it. But
Hmm.
what skills as a game developer did you think you wouldn't use? But oh, sorry, let me try and rephrase this. So, as a game developer, what skills have you used that you thought you never would?
Hmm. Um. Well, as an indie, there's a lot of skills that I've had to learn that I never would have expected. So like understanding analytics and how to slice up data is like something I'm learning. Wasn't even on my radar when I started programming. How to how to make a good social media post. you
Mm-hmm.
know, um, how to deal with an angry fan, or like an angry person on Twitter, and how to like cope with that emotionally, but also like how to redirect that into something positive. Um, Community management in general. I think a big one though, just for game development in general, is working with other people. Just because most of the time you can't make a thing on your own, and so trying to trying to find a way to collaborate with people, but like contribute to something without trying to control it. Or sometimes you do need to control it. But also like depending on what role you're in the team, like making sure other people are heard and um, uh, communicating when you have issues with a person or with a person's work. Doing that with tact. As a company with employees now, I gotta think about that a lot more than I did before. But even in AAA, it was like, especially if people are working long hours and they're stressed, there's definitely like moments where things get really tense. And
Yeah.
just trying to like, diffuse those things and trying to be like a team player. I remember, I remember early on in my career, there was something I did. It was this thing I did with like the way the characters moved or something that I was like a whole day on it or something, and I presented it to the team, and everybody hated it. And I remember getting like really like unreasonably emotional about this. It's like, okay, this isn't this isn't an appropriate spot to be like mad about something. Um, but people get attached to things that they've been working on for a long time. So um, and then just knowing when to cut something out when it's not working,
Mm-hmm.
or like to change course. You know, there's lots of things that you try in the course of developing a game or making a company that works where sometimes you got to look back and say, hey, this isn't working. Like we either got to do something else, or stop this altogether, and sometimes it's just like, let's just kill this and not work on it anymore. Sometimes that's the right thing to do. So yeah, lots of skills that I didn't expect to have to use. But I think most of them revolve around people. And this is probably, like, for me personally, the biggest challenge, because I guess my emotional intelligence quota probably isn't as high as it. Just recognizing when people are upset, or recognizing when somebody understand, it's a major challenge. So yeah, just people skills. I think the big one.
Yeah, you think well, with any like team position, people skills aren't necessary, but you think it's more of like a technical position like you have, it would be less needed. At least for on the AAA side, when you're not like the top person.
You would think so, but it's amazing how much that's not true. Like,
Hmm.
I think um, the people who succeed most in tech and programming are people who can communicate. Um, because you're never working in a bubble. Like, there's almost never a situation where program this character. And so, like, at Raven, when I was working at AAA, I was a character designer for Marvel games. So Marvel X-Men Legends 2 and Marvel Ultimate Alliance and the Wolverine game, and it was like I had to work with animators who weren't necessarily game design experts and have their own aesthetic ideas about how an animation should work, and the level designers who are trying to, like, design mechanics around how these characters work and stuff like that, and other programmers, so like AI programmers who have to make enemies that deal with these character moves, um, and then project leads who have their own deadlines and ideas about how things should work, and sometimes people they're beholden to, so like Marvel has their ideas about what this character should and like probably 30% of my time as a game programmer was like communicating with people.
Mm.
Um, and so I think uh, there's very little in game programming that you can do and doesn't affect some input from somebody, or just doing a play test and trying to, like, get useful information out of somebody, or take that feedback. Sometimes it's negative feedback, and it's like you got to be able to take that in stride and soak it in without, like, arguing, but also not just, like, acting on it right away. And so I think people skills are probably at least half of, like, good programming. Um, and especially, I mean, that's true of QA and stuff too. Just like being able to communicate effectively to the developers what you saw and what broke and stuff like that too. So, um, yeah, I think there's a common misconception that, like, tech and programming are less personal or less people involved, and maybe people who, who don't like a lot of interpersonal interaction, like, gravitate towards it, but they don't really succeed as often as people who can, like, actually communicate on a personal level with people.
Mm.
So, and this is something I learned before I even had a job in the industry, because I was like, I was doing Unreal modding, and I form a team of modders on the internet. It's like interpersonal problems are what kills every mod. It's never the technical thing.
Yep.
So just being able to direct people, and you get somebody who signs up and then doesn't do any work, and then somebody who signs up and ends up working on it 60 hours a week because they just have nothing better to do, and just trying to, like, manage all that. It's hard.
Yeah, people management, especially for like mods and like kind of love funded projects where everyone has like other things that are more important in their life going
Mm-hmm.
on. Like getting that time management is a pain in the butt.
Yeah. Yep. Totally.
Oh man. So AAA. I'm not sure if you had the same situation with Race of Sun, but there's this dreaded, infamous thing called crunch time.
Mm-hmm.
What can you tell me about crunch time from your perspective?
What? Sorry, what was the question though?
What can you tell me about that crunch time? That time when like all of the developers in there 60, 80 hours a week just
Yeah.
working like nonstop nights
Yeah.
in. Because we've all heard horror stories like people like sleeping in offices, going to hospitals,
Mm-hmm.
dehydration.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any experience with that?
So yeah, so I think I worked in a studio. I was lucky enough to work, in Wisconsin, in the Midwest. The the trouble is getting talent, I think, because a lot of people who want to get into the games go out to the coast and stuff. And so I think more people who worked at the studio I was at have been doing it for a while. More of them had families, with kids and stuff like that. And so people maybe valued their time a little more um, than like your average 20-something guy with no kids. And so people probably didn't put up with it as much. Um, that said, like there were definitely times I crunched in the studio, just because it was like if you're making a Call of Duty game, there's a hard deadline and you got to submit to Sony and Microsoft and whatever like a month before that or whatever, and that's a hard. If you want to get these things in the game, you got to work extra. Sometimes it's self-inflicted. It's like if you're if you're not a very experienced developer, you're bad at predicting how long things will take. You might start on a little side project that you think is going to be really fun. Did this move when you hit this button, and you dive into this a month before submission, and then it's like you got to make it work because you kind of own this thing now, and so sometimes it's like happens down the chain. More often than not, it's like publisher says, "Hey, we need to add multiplayer to this game," and to do it, and you just gotta like everybody's got to work to make that happen. Um, I think 9 times out of 10, it's a leadership issue from the top down. It's like you gotta have people who can accurately predict how long things will take and have the wisdom to say no to things and make a plan and stick with it. And when those things go wrong, that's when the workload just becomes too much. And I think, what people say are true. It's like the longer you crunch, the less effective it's going to be. The more it's going to add to your stress, your anxiety, your health issues. I know one guy who just, I know multiple people who got divorced, after a couple of years in the industry, who just their families weren't seeing them anymore. I know at least 1 or 2 people who got into drinking and just heavy drug use just because it was like, the anxiety of stress of having that on you, especially if like the people in charge aren't sympathetic. So I like to see it go away. That said, like being a person who runs a company now and who has employees and payroll to make, like it's hard not to get into that mindset personally, where it's like, okay, we have to get this thing done, and we have to hit these deadlines, not because somebody's telling me to. Thing, and so it's really easy for me to get into that mode, just where I feel like I should be working all the time. It's like, just yesterday as an example, I was working for about 4 hours, just because like we got to get this new thing out, because we're kind of in that situation where it's just like we've got to ship things. So my ideal is to like not have to work overtime personally, but like as a person who owns that company, I try to shield my employees from that now, and I take it on myself if I need to, and I try to make good decisions about what we're going to add and what we're going to cut, and and try not to change the plan midstream and stuff like that too. But long term, I think what's going to solve it is requiring people to pay overtime. It's like if you're going to ask somebody to work 60 hours a week, they should be paid extra for that.
Oh yeah, totally.
And also just like unions I think could help. I think having a culture of responsibility among everybody is going to help. So like it's really easy for somebody who's 19 and just got a job on the to just do this stuff voluntarily because they love it, and I'm sympathetic to that, but also like that's very much contributing to the problem, because that's expectation that everybody's going to do that. So I try not to send emails or messages to people I work with on the weekends unless I really need to. It's like, go home, relax, don't work. Go home at 5 on Friday, or go home at 5 every night, and come back and work a solid 8 tomorrow. And this, like, if you give me that, then I feel like I shouldn't ask for more than that. But yeah, sometimes it's a necessary evil to keep the lights on, but I think long term it's unsustainable, and that's more or less how I feel about it. So
yeah, for sure. I'm always a big like person I'm always big on the fact that, hey, if you're working, you're getting paid for it. Like, that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the minute at my job, if I clock out, I'm not doing anything else. I'm not.
Yeah.
I don't care if it didn't get done. If you need me to get done, I'm punching back in, and I'm doing it then I'm punching right back out. Because, and one thing I've always, like, thought, too, was that time is so valuable, and it really sucks when you don't have time to enjoy other facets of your life. You make your whole life one-dimensional.
Right.
Yeah, it's very unhealthy.
Yeah, it's unhealthy, and it also like stifles creativity and actual, like, if your goal is to make something awesome, like, you can't just work all the time. you got to find inspiration and let your brain rest and take time to reflect on things and give you space to come back and like look at something, I see people struggling with that when they're trying to get into indie games, working their 40-hour a week job, and they're working on their indie game, and they feel this pressure to get it done. And it's like, I respect it, but like, don't kill yourself trying to do it. Like, sometimes it's good to just put your project down for a few weeks and then come back, and like, you'll find solutions that you hadn't considered before with a little bit of perspective, Yeah.
Yeah. One thing I always try to tell people too, if you want to really change like how your brain's working, if you have no idea what you're doing, if you're lost, take a walk, take a shower, go like ice skating, go like look at a different movie you would never watch. Like, if you hate horror, watch a horror movie. You'll get ideas just from being somewhere different, somewhere.
Yeah.
Separating work from home is huge too. Huge.
Totally. Yep. Yeah, that's a struggle for me. I mean, I'm sitting in my basement right now. We have an office, but I work from home about two or 3 days a week, and it's like, it can be hard. It can be hard to separate.
Yeah, I know that feeling, because this is my gaming PC and my relaxation PC, and also my like work PC. So one day I want to get to the point where I can have 2 different setups, like an office setup where I just do work in there, and like my playroom that has like big balls and colorful lighting and just so much fun, in my office just work.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, but with everyone, it's not the easiest thing to do for everybody. So
yeah, totally.
Alrighty, and we're coming to the tail end of this. Do you have any projects you want to announce? You want to have any go on?
So we're working on this Race of Sun free-to-play thing, and then we're gonna put Evergarden on Android, which is our puzzle game that we launched on. And we're working on a new game that we haven't announced yet, but it's it involves cats and helicopters, and it's kind of like this open world physics sandbox type game, and we're just having a ton of fun, like making a game where you can just kind of do anything. So our biggest struggle right now is finding a name for it, just because it's like, it's like the hardest part of game development, I think, is actually just picking a good name for stuff. So.
Yeah, for sure. Names are hard.
Yeah. So you'll hear more from us soon on that, if you follow Flippfly or whatever.
Perfect. And for everybody watching the cast, I'll put a link to all Flippfly socials and Aaron's socials down below, along with a few links to Race of Sun on Steam as well.
Cool. Thanks.
Awesome. Well, Aaron, thank you so much. You've been a great guest. I've loved this episode. It's been like, my goal with every episode is to get a new perspective on things, and hearing things from someone who, I don't talk to many game developers, so it's good like hearing this.
I really appreciate you having me. Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Anytime. Well, all right, everybody, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Perspective Podcast. If you liked it, please tell a friend. Let us know what you think. Otherwise, have a good night. I'll see you all later. Bye-bye.